Good morning and welcome to this webinar, The Convergence of Digital and Physical Security. This event brought to you by Security Magazine is sponsored by Everbridge and Convergent. I'm your moderator, Maria Henriquez, editor at Security Magazine. Thank you for joining us. The format for this webinar will be a little bit different from what you're used to, where I will pose questions to our distinguished panel for discussion. Please submit your questions for the panelists throughout the presentation, and we'll conclude with the webinar with a live Q&A. Today's presenters are Tracy Reinhold, Chief Security Officer with Everbridge, and Eric Unag, VP Technology and Innovation at Convergent. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, Maria.
Thanks, Maria.
Of course. And for our very first question, how has the global pandemic changed how organizations think about managing risks?
So I think one of the things that we need to consider is the reality of a hybrid workforce and the complexities that adds to our security challenges when we address risk and vulnerability. With multiple endpoints, with people dispersed across the country and sometimes across the world, it presents new challenges for us from a digital perspective. The other aspect of that is, how do we address duty of care responsibilities for our employees who are no longer co-located in a single location or in company-owned locations?
Yeah, Tracy, it's a great theme, and it's one we work with a lot of global organizations across a lot of different industries, and this ability to engage a global workforce and create that portability where people can really work wherever they are or remotely creates a whole series of new complexities for organizations managing risks and identities and those types of things. And one of the things that we see a lot is just the ability to engage that workforce is predicated upon the idea of global consistency, right? That's programs, that's systems, all these things that enable people to, embrace the talent wherever it exists and to really engage people where they want to work. And that's definitely a new reality like you described.
But I think that the other aspect of this is that the pandemic has accelerated the acceptance of technology. I think it's put us light years ahead of where we would have been without the pandemic. And the other upside of that is the ability to leverage talent wherever it is, as opposed to having to relocate the workforce. So I think those are the upsides of the pandemic as it relates to our challenges and opportunities in the security field.
In what ways has the hybrid workforce impacted risk management?
Eric?
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic, and again, I referenced sort of our work across a lot of global organizations, and when you think about the new definition of hybrid, it really is a new way of thinking for most organizations when they have to assess really what is the risk profile of a workforce that is remote, is local, is global, and is moving between locations both physically and virtually all the time. And that's a really an interesting posture for a lot of organizations to be in. And Tracy, you just mentioned, I think, a really important aspect of this, which is the positive aspect of pandemic relative to hybrid workforce is really organizations really being this is 7 billion people on Earth through forced change management, right, in 18 months to really rethink how work gets done, how processes and systems need to be effective, and really to focus on the most important aspects of customer and employee experiences. And I think we've seen organizations really zooming way out and thinking about reimagining how processes and systems functions, and that the hybrid workforce really is one of those, I think, most poignant areas where the security organizations that we work with are really looking at those aspects and reimagining a lot of how systems, processes, and their risk management approach fits together with that new reality.
So getting a little closer to home, one of the risks associated with the hybrid workforce is, how do we address the insider threat program? So when you look at crown jewels or trade secrets, in the past, there was a process by which we looked at insider threat, unusual business hours, logging onto computers at odd hours. The pandemic has turned that all on its head because people are now working in their own time zones. People have relocated for work, which makes it more difficult to identify the telltale signs of an insider threat program. So while there's the positive of bringing folks from around the globe, there's also the negative of being aware of what's happening. That insider threat program has also actually been exacerbated by the lack of cultural identity in a company. So with the remoteness, some folks are not associating themselves with the company like they would normally if they came into the office every day. That isolation leads to the ability for threat actors to engage in social engineering on employees, identify vulnerabilities, and then leverage those to help them acquire trade secrets and the crown jewels from an organization. So the detection and prevention of insider threat has become more complicated based on this hybrid work model.
Okay. And next question. How does separating digital and physical security increase risk and the ability to manage that?
So, you know, and Eric already knows this is like a pet peeve of mine. The siloing of digital and physical actually creates risk. So when you separate the two, you create a void. And in that void, risk and vulnerability thrive because everybody thinks it's somebody else's responsibility. The convergence of digital and physical actually closes that risk alley so that it reduces exponentially and allows security professionals to work across the platforms of both digital and physical to identify risk and vulnerability and to mitigate those much faster and much more effectively than they could before. You know, traditionally, that separation has sort of been baked into companies. Whether it's a CISO and a CSO, call them what you want, the director of either digital and physical. The reality is they have to work as a team in order to effectively protect an organization. We're seeing that more and more as time evolves, where that converges because everything is becoming digital. So whether it's a physical aspect of allowing a cyber attack or a cyber attack that allows a physical intrusion, those two have to combine in order to effectively protect an organization.
Tracy, you've echoed my pet peeve as well, because we see this a lot. That the void that creates, right? That's a really important aspect of this. Is that in that void, it allows bad actors on both the physical and digital side, opportunities to exploit vulnerabilities and create risk. And we see a real acceleration with a lot of our global organizations around, unifying identities, right? And I think a major theme in some of the things that we work with around digital transformation is this idea of connecting the physical to the digital world, right? I read an article from Ernst & Young not that long ago that said in the next, 7 years, there'll be 100 billion, industrial IoT devices, connected in the world. And you think about what that means in connecting physical space to, the digital world and these concepts of digital twins. And those are people, those are assets, those are buildings, those are, all those things. And trying to really understand definitively, who is who and what is what, and unifying all those things is I think one of the chief challenges that we, I think are tasked with in the coming years through all these transitions that organizations are navigating.
I think the thing to remember too, Maria, is that the job of security, whether it's digital or physical, is to enable the business. So you can create an airtight protective envelope. The problem is you can't get any work done in that. So it's about compromising, and it's about understanding the core business and accessing how security, whether it's digital or physical, actually enables that business to be successful by providing a secure environment in which they can conduct their business. We should never lose track of the fact that our job is to make businesses successful. And we do that by collaborating between digital and physical resources to protect the business in a way that enables them to be successful.
Of course. Next question. What emerging technologies are providing new system intelligence sources and are providing new ways to manage risk?
Yeah, this is go ahead, Tracy.
Yeah, go ahead, because I'm curious to see what you have to say on this one, Eric.
Well, this is a personal passion of mine for sure, and in working with some of the world's leading tech companies and their work with some of the global customers that we service around the world, it is a fascinating time to be in this business when it comes to systems. And it sounds cliche to say that things like AI and cloud and data are at the heart of that, but it really is true, right? This is a literal transformation of the tools that we're able to bring to bear from a system perspective, right? To solve those challenges and to enable the business outcomes and create the success that you're describing in this new in the future state that we're trying to achieve for a lot of these organizations. And specifically, I think people say AI generically a lot right now, and what it means for the security world and a lot of these outcomes. But I think where we're seeing real tangible impacts on program systems and organizations is in the areas of computer vision specifically. We're really rapidly approaching a point where we can turn almost anything we see into data now, and when visual intelligence becomes data, it really allows us to correlate and talk about that, cross-domain threat intelligence in a much different light when the things we see in physical space becomes data. And that spills over into operational opportunities for process improvement and lots of different things that organizations are able to leverage. And so I think computer vision is one of the areas in systems that has just an outsized impact on our organization's ability to bring new sources of intelligence to bear, both from a security perspective, but also a business intelligence perspective. And that's beginning to bleed over into, some audio intelligence, the same types of AI and I'll say data science approach to, different audio signals and audio intelligence. And then really just the convergence and fusion of all of these different data types and data sources across a variety of different domains, and our ability to correlate them, big data and the approach in those arenas is really changing organizations' ability to deliver these outcomes.
So I want to pull on that thread just a little bit and talk about how either machine learning or artificial intelligence helps with the deconfliction of intelligence. So the aggregation of intelligence is something that we've done for decades, right? We just mass huge amounts of data together. The problem with that is that data in and of itself is white noise if it's not relevant to what you're trying to solve for. So what machine learning algorithms and artificial intelligence has done has allowed us to actually deconflict that intelligence based on what's important to the company. So we can actually neck that down, for lack of a better term, to something that is relevant and meaningful for an organization, so they don't have to sift through all of that to try to find that one nugget that's important to them. The other part about technology that is helping is automation. So, Eric talked about the digital transformation, the automation of response capabilities that takes the machine's capability to discern whether or not there's an F2 tornado. So we're going to automatically push an alert out to our employees as opposed to waiting for a human to make that decision. These are things that actually impact the quality and the safety of the lives of our employees. So in that way, technology is really advancing the practice of security and the ability of security to enhance the company's organizational capabilities and to maintain that operational tempo that leads to success. So I think in those respects, the deconfliction of aggregated intelligence and the automation of a response capability is putting us light years ahead of where we used to be. One of the things I like about technology is that, what got us here is not going to get us there. Technology's lifespan is so short that what we are touting as groundbreaking today will be obsolete in a couple of weeks because the cycle of technology development is so fast. So there's just so much out there and I hate that, and I'm getting kind of geeky, but it gets me really excited because we're talking about enhancing our capabilities with less resources and more capability. It's just fantastic. I'm just really excited by that. And I'll stop before I get really wound up.
Well, Tracy, I have to pile on a little bit because I do think, it's funny because when we talk to a lot of the large global customers and the way that they think about digital transformation, it really is something that they put in a different category, right? That they're looking at this as a change that's fourth industrial revolution oriented, right? This is a step function change in how humanity operates that isn't just one more technology cycle, right? Like we've all lived in the last few decades through a lot of, incremental technology changes in our ability to deliver security outcomes. But we are fundamentally rewiring the way the world operates now, right? This is like electricity or the mechanization of manufacturing. It's those changes that took 100 years for the world to, change how people relate to each other, work gets done, all those kind of things. I think that's the most interesting thing that I've observed of the largest global customers that we work with is their orientation around that concept, and that they are looking at and really zooming out and thinking about these changes in that context, and how do they re-architect their systems and their processes around those ideas. And technology is moving really fast, but I think this concept of the connected world and really the intelligent edge is one of those areas where, to your point about deconflicting data and intelligence, being able to better identify actual risks, not just create event noise right at the edge, and being able to aggregate the right information and making sensors much more intelligent across systems, and being able to bring that together in a way that you can automate response and improve the effectiveness of programs. We've been doing, I like to joke that we've been, doing these things with, duct tape and popsicle sticks for years as, security integrators and practitioners, but we have a whole new series of tools at our disposal now. And it's not even early innings, right? We're in the dugout still of where all this technology is going. But I do think the most important thing for organizations to think about here is to not just look at this as one, a simple technology step function, but that it is fundamentally rewiring the way that we all, can deliver these outcomes for organizations.
I think the other thing that we have to consider with technology is the user interface, right? So how do we make this usable for the daily practitioner? Technology that is not understood by the people that have to use it is actually not very effective. So part of it is understanding the practitioner's perspective and their point of view, and then designing that user interface in a way that allows them to seamlessly integrate that technology into their operation. The easier you make it, the more likely they are to adopt it. And those that don't adopt it will be left behind. The idea that, if we look back even just a couple of decades ago into the 80s, right? What was it? It was guards, gates, and guns, right? That's what security meant to everybody. And that's when I say, what got us here is not going to get us there. That sort of mentality will not effectively protect an organization as it continues its own digital revolution. So I like to think of technology as today's steam engine, right? So how that changed during the Industrial Revolution, when you think about Prince Albert riding on a train in the 1820s, and what a radical concept that was. Think about how technology is changing the way we view the world, how we interact with it, and how we protect it. And I think that's where we're going to see significant challenges and opportunities in the very near future as we embrace new people into the security profession.
Okay, awesome. Next question. How does enterprise resilience increase your ability to maintain an operational tempo that increases revenue while reducing risk?
So resilience, so technology, this is Tracy's opinion, for lack of a better term, technology enables resilience. Technology in and of itself is not the goal. It is a tool that is used to ensure resilience. So these types of technology actually allow a company to recover faster from a business disruption, which allows them to return to revenue generation quicker. So leveraging technology to enable resilience. So whether it's a critical event management platform, whether it's mass notification, whether it's some way to protect traveling employees, all of these things result in a company being more resilient. First of all, being able to identify risk and vulnerability early on, to action that intelligence in a way that protects our employees, and to recover from any disruption that manifests during that time period. It's always great to be proactive, but we have to be realistic to understand that as proactive as we are, the bad guys only have to be right once. We have to be right every time. So the odds are really not in our favor when you think about that. So enabling technology to expedite recovery from a disruption actually returns the company to a revenue generating posture faster than you can without technology. So for me, technology is the great enabler of resilience. When it is adopted by an organization, executed flawlessly, and appreciated for what it brings to the table. I think in that way, it really helps organizations maintain that resilient posture that allows them to maintain that operational tempo that leads to success. Because that is the goal. Like we said earlier, security's goal is to enable the business. And if we can enable the business through building a resilient posture by leveraging technology, then everybody wins.
Tracy, I couldn't agree more with all your points, and I won't pile on with the resilience angle. I think that's been very well demonstrated through pandemic about the organizations who were able to be resilient early, and the advantage that gave them in the marketplace and for their customers and employees to continue to operate, and the ones who didn't, right, and to see the significant impact. I think there's from the systems integrator perspective, we're seeing a really interesting evolution of posture from organizations thinking about that, the revenue implications and really the operational impact of a lot of the technology that's available now. And one of the specific areas where we're seeing cross industries, cross geographies is around, visual intelligence. And the conversations that we're having with a lot of organizations really in security and outside of security is organizations need to begin to evolve their thinking and not just think about investments in things like video as, security risk, life safety type things, but investments in a visual intelligence platform that they can use for all types of different, capabilities, whether that's, customer experience things, process improvement, quality assurance, lots of different areas that, also raise their level of, risk management from a system capability perspective, but then also give them all types of new operational capabilities to drive revenue sources, reduce costs, and they're similar investments. It's a different mindset to be thinking about investments in these technologies as visual sensors and a visual intelligence platform versus security cameras, and that the mindset spans beyond our traditional stakeholders and requires us to engage more of an organization. To your point about enabling the business, this is a really unique opportunity for our organization, our organizations and stakeholders in security to be bringing lots of new value to their constituents in this era of new technology enablement.
There's a school of thought out there that talks about how organizations have optimized revenue generation over risk and resilience over the last couple of decades. What the pandemic has done is demonstrated the criticality of risk and resilience as it relates to continued revenue growth. So it's a long-term strategy that positions an organization to be successful into the future. One of the things about resilience is the combination of agility and flexibility. One without the other doesn't give you the resilient posture that you need, but the combination of the two, which is then further enhanced by technology advancements, really provides for a company's sustained growth in a way that manages risk and ensures the resilient posture for the company. So I don't think it's a trade-off where revenue has to suffer because of a risk and resilience posture. I think it's actually enhanced when we think about the sustainability of an organization going forward and how we can actually help that organization achieve those goals by developing resilience and risk tolerance and risk acceptance as part of the culture in the company, so that it's not something that, if it's purely a regulatory function, risk extends beyond that when you think about that. So I think that there's an opportunity here with the pandemic to really elevate the criticality of that and to leverage the expertise that exists in the security world to help organizations maintain that resilient posture that they need.
Okay. Next panel question. How are the technology trends of cloud and IoT changing the way convergence is achieved?
Well, I think we've touched on this topic a little bit, but the idea of moving to a modern architecture, the security industry largely has dealt with or played with the same tools for the last several decades in how systems are delivered and architected. And when we think about those underlying themes of digital transformation, those building blocks, right? You think about IoT, these intelligent edge devices. You think about cloud and data and these other enabling technologies. I think what's at the core of that, when it comes to intelligence, is our ability to rapidly integrate data sources together and better correlate, again, cross-domain threat intelligence in ways that were never possible before. From an integrator's perspective, we've had to do this with basic tools and software integrations at kind of a server level. And when we think about the customer experiences that we all interact with on a daily basis, right, from a phone, from a cloud, from an app perspective, those back-end integrations and the data exchange that create those seamless experiences, that create those instinctual user experiences that we're all used to, are enabled by those technologies. And I think that's the most, I think, at a basic level, when we're beginning to think about long-term technology roadmaps with customers now that contemplate that type of a intelligent edge and cloud architecture. All new outcomes are possible when you have the ability to bring together data sources of all kinds and begin to correlate, and prioritize and automate what matters most in entirely new ways. And with traditional architectures, that's difficult to do. It's possible, but the power of everything we see from cloud and a lot of the experiences that we see every day as consumers is really coming to our space in new ways that allows us to deliver different outcomes.
So leaving the cloud aside for a moment, I want to talk just briefly about the Internet of Things. We would assume that by now everybody is aware of the connectivity issue, but all we need to do is look at how threat actors are accessing our systems through connected technology. So whether it's through an HVAC system or another system that's already online, it allows threat actors to actually gain access, introduce malicious code, malicious software, conduct ransomware, etc. So it's still happening today. So I think one of the challenges that we face as organizations is educating our workforce about the risks and vulnerabilities associated with technology, not so that they're afraid of it, but so that they understand and use it responsibly. There are certain things that we do, and it kind of harkens back to the whole insider threat question too. A lot of this can be mitigated through educating our workforce about the way technology enables us, but also the way that it exposes us to vulnerability and risk. And I think if we do that, we have a better chance of thwarting threat actors from gaining access to our networks and our systems in a way that is responsible and respectful and allows for the company's continued growth. So the Internet of Things, if you ask 100 different people that are not technologically inclined, some of them will not know what you're talking about. And some of those folks have key positions in organizations. So educating them, it doesn't have to be a hands-on keyboard person. That's not necessarily where the risk will come from. It could come from anywhere. And understanding that you are a target based on your position and based on the access to the technology that the company uses, whether you are the HVAC contractor, there's tons of opportunities for threat actors to gain access through Internet of Things. And I think it's something that as security professionals, we have to maintain a vigilant posture on that and to help dispel the myths and enhance understanding of the vulnerabilities as well as the capabilities that they bring to an organization.
Actually, this is a really, really important point. And one of the things that we observe with, again, I think the most progressive customers that we deal with is really leaning into that, the IoT cybersecurity end of things. Everybody knows this is coming, and this provides a different level of capability, but being thoughtful and intentional about the definition of IoT, the cyber programs that need to surround that, right, from a risk management, monitoring, update, cycle perspective, life cycle management, all those kind of things, managed intentionally, proactively, and consistently across these deployments is priority number one for the world's largest organizations. And we're seeing more and more of that theme emerge. And and a lot of the more progressive organizations placing that as a frontline emphasis to system deployments and less so about capabilities and more so about how do we create resiliency around these operational technology networks that are being proliferating across organizations. And security can't secure the physical front door and open the cyber back door. That can't be how we go about deploying technology. So it's our responsibility, right, to help organizations understand what types of capabilities we can bring to bear to help solve those challenges, and again educate and help evangelize inside of organizations beyond our traditional points of contact and decision makers on how these programs need to be run and maintained and sustained over time to be effective.
Well, also associated with that is end of life planning. Right. So how do we plan for end of life of technology? So sustaining technology that is no longer supported is actually incredibly risky for an organization. So security has to actually interface with product development engineering in a company to make sure that there's a plan going forward, not only in the development and execution of new technology, but the retiring of old technology, so that we don't inadvertently expose the company to risk because we have a couple of customers that are left using a platform. We've got to figure out what that looks like, and we have to make sure that our product teams and our engineering teams are aware of the risks of things that we extend past end of life.
Okay, and the last panel question: what are leading organizations doing to leverage traditional security infrastructure to manage different types of organizational risk?
So, it's funny. One of the things that has really been helpful is a PSIM system, a physical security integration management system, which allows organizations to leverage legacy cameras and video analytics without expensing all new technology. By integrating them into a physical security management system, it allows them to have better visibility on threats and vulnerabilities inside their organization without having to have the capital expense associated with buying all new technology. So I think large companies are leveraging this idea because it actually is incredibly effective and efficient, and it's also cost effective. It's not creating an opportunity for someone to have to buy new stuff. They can use what they have and use this integration of those tools into a single platform so that they can manage multiple locations from a single command center, and gives them complete visibility on areas. That does two things. It reduces your overhead from a human capital perspective. It enhances your technological view of your facilities and your people, and it allows you to leverage technology to protect your organization more effectively and more efficiently than you could in the past. So that's one example of where technology has actually been able to marry the new with the old to create that protective envelope that protects a company.
This is you could have an entire webinar conversation about where all this goes, right? And this is an area that I find just absolutely fascinating, working with the Amazons and the Microsofts and other people in the world as they are really envisioning the future that we're all going to live in a lot of ways. And one of a couple of interesting areas that we're seeing organizational impact with what I would say is traditional security infrastructure is visual intelligence. We talked about this a little bit, right? But this idea of thinking about when you put the smartest people in an organization and equip them with the idea that anything you can see, you can turn into data, they start to come up with really creative ideas on how to bring, impact to the organizations, right? And when you think about digital transformation themes and the imperatives that all organizations have to create new customer experiences and change employee experiences, giving an organization those kind of tools and saying, what could you do if you had your smartest people, observing your most important processes or employee interactions or customer interactions, those kind of things. How would you trend it over time, optimize, make different decisions, all those types of things. Same thing with physical space. We talked a lot about the hybrid workforce and the globalization and the portability of employees. And we're seeing lots of new and interesting ideas coming from traditional security infrastructure, right? On looking at utilization of physical space, proximity of things, the identification of assets in real time, lots of things that are allowing organizations to bring a more effective cost approach to managing, a very expensive part of a P&L, which is real estate, right? And the utilization of real estate and how to do that better. So I think there's certainly risks associated with intelligent edge technologies and IoT, but it's unleashing an entirely new way for organizations to manage a lot of different aspects of previously unmeasured or unoptimized areas of a business, and lots of new and exciting things that happen there. I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg there as well.
So I think technology enables security, but I think one of the things that we have to make sure is that our security professionals understand their role and how they interact with the business. So part of that is building a business case for the technology spend in terms that resonates with the core business. How does this enhance the organization's capability to either expand, continue a revenue generation, or to develop a better tool? So part of the technology advancement in security is educating our security workforce about what role they play in the enablement of business. So being able to, for lack of a better term, have an elevator speech that talks about why security is actually a business enabler and not a cost center. How it is we make that transformation, and how the technology spend or lack of spend either enhances or inhibits revenue growth for a company. If we think about that, our job, when we look at the bigger picture, is to leverage technology to enhance the business's capability. In order to make that argument, our security professionals have to understand the business and have to understand how we actually add value to that business on a day-to-day basis. It can't just be the traditional security speak. It has to be spoken in terms that resonate with the key players in an organization, and our role in that supporting function can be better understood by the folks that are creating business opportunities for the company. And I think if we do that and we leverage technology effectively, security then takes on a whole new position in the organization when we think about what strategic vision looks like for a company and how security enables that vision to be executed.
Tracy, that's a tremendous point, and I think it's a characteristic of the most effective security leaders in the organizations that we work with, is that they have a laser focus on what are the cultural imperatives of their organization, what is driving their economic engine, and how they can contribute to that, right? And those are the people who are finding ways to tell a different story, right? To create that elevator pitch that is more oriented around the business and what they're trying to achieve in the marketplace, more so than just a cost center in a P&L for security.
All right. Thank you so much, Eric and Tracy, for a great discussion. Before we have our presenters address some of the questions that have been submitted throughout the program, I wanted to remind you that we would love your feedback in our webinar survey to help improve our programs. And now for our first question, what do you think we can expect this year when it comes to supply chain?
So that's a great question, and if we had that, I could also predict tonight's lottery winners. But I will tell you that one of the things that has emerged is actually supply chain resilience versus supply chain security. That tends to be more of an issue today as far as the sustainability of the supply chain, not from a security perspective, but from an unintended disruption in that supply chain. And that's where, when Eric and I were talking about the aggregation and deconfliction of intelligence, leveraging that to identify supply chain risks as it relates to resilience, I think will become more and more of a factor. It wasn't too long ago that we started this just-in-time delivery and folks stopped having warehouses full of stuff, right? So because of the cost associated with that. The downside of that is if you don't have a resilient supply chain, there are disruptions which allows your competitors an advantage in the marketplace when you cannot deliver the product. So resilience from a supply chain perspective I think, will continue to be a primary focus in the coming weeks and months and years. And I think it's something that we can actually help address with technology going forward.
Yeah, listen, I would love to be able to answer this question. I think the inevitability in the near term is more pain to come relative to supply chain. But I think what we've seen from a lot of organizations is a unique opportunity to observe, the weak points to create that resilience, right? This is at least for most practitioners right now is the most practical, tabletop exercise of supply chain disruption that they've witnessed, right? And to really be putting a lot of their thinking and strategies to the test and scrutinizing where they really can improve the resilience of supply chain and bringing a lot of technology to bear to help deliver that in the future this is a really unique opportunity to be bringing a very different viewpoint to that and looking at critically at what's happening right now to, create that for the future.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about cyber attacks and ransomware? Do you see those instances increasing or decreasing in 2022? I think the response might be a little bit obvious, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you think? I don't think we have barely touched the tip of the iceberg in that. It goes back to what we talked about earlier: is that the life cycle of technology actually works in the adversary's benefit, because keeping those systems patched and updated is a challenge. Everybody knows that. So I think that as long as there are nefarious characters in the world and bad actors, there will always be cyber warfare, either at the nation state level or from criminal organizations directed at the infrastructure of all organizations and countries. So I do believe that it is here to stay and that we have an obligation to be vigilant in our defense posture, which includes technology, but also educating the workforce about how cybercrime is perpetrated by threat actors, whether they're nation state or criminal organizations, or simply hacktivists who are just out there because they just want to disrupt things.
No question. Look, the threat surface is expanding for every organization as everything is becoming connected and people are remote. But Tracy, I think I want to tie this back to something you said earlier that I think is incredibly important, which is the cultural identity that a lot of organizations are struggling to keep and maintain, right, in a remote and distributed environment where in-person meetings and who we are and who we relate to and the people element of the organizations that we all serve is such a critical part of where these voids get created and where these vulnerabilities begin to emerge. And I think it's an incredible challenge for all of our customer organizations to, from the top, from the executive leadership on down, to think about the resiliency of their workforce from a relational and cultural perspective, because it is the underpinning of how you defend against a lot of this, right? The understanding of who we are and how we relate and what the normal expectations are for, being together in an organization and being part of an organization. Those are all the underpinnings of what makes successful programs here. And I think a lot of our organizations are facing challenges with that. We all are, right? Look, we're all remote right now. We're all doing things that we may have done, 2 years ago in person. We'd be sitting in a room together and doing this. And without that, we have to find new ways to create those cultural expectations that help us understand what is out of the ordinary, that good programs can rely on.
Okay. And final question. I work for a small organization with fewer than 100 employees. What's the best way for me to get started to manage risk?
So that's actually a fairly simple answer, and that is, number one, understand the business, and understand where the business is going, and then design your protective strategy around enabling that business. So whether you are making cutting boards or digital components, there is risk associated with that. So positioning your small security organization within a small company so that it enables that business, identifies and mitigates risk, hopefully before they actually manifest, is how you add value. There's not a simple one answer solves all things, but if you are strategic, if you understand the business and you execute and educate, you can actually protect that small business in a way that enhances its ability to survive and grow.
I think the other thing that's really important for small organizations is to building on what what you laid out there, Tracy, is then creating a plan that you don't have to accomplish these things all at one time, right? A lot of this requires investments and the creation of programs, and to, as an output of the exercise that Tracy just talked about, understanding those organizational imperatives, beginning to prioritize risk, also creating a program that you can sustain, right? A roadmap of either technology investments, process improvements, all these kind of things that you can begin to implement that doesn't require. A lot of people get wrapped up in the idea I have to do everything at once. I have to do all these things and make this all happen today. But to do it in a way that is sustainable for the organizations that continues to grow, I think is a really important step for organizations that are small but that are going to be growing in the future.
Okay. It looks like that's all the time that we have for questions today. Please join me in thanking Tracy Reinhold and Eric Unag for their great presentation, as well as our sponsors, Everbridge and Convergent. If you do have any additional questions or comments, please don't hesitate to click the email us button on the console. Please also visit securitymagazine.com for the archive of this presentation, as well as information about upcoming events. We appreciate your time and hope that you have found this webinar to be a valuable experience.